I still remember that day clearly. Winter in Montana was bone-chilling, but I felt a burning in my chest when I heard my mom say, "Move your toys into David's room. He needs his own space to study." I stood silently in the corner, still holding the broken pencil in my hand. She didn't even look at me. She never did when it was about David. I was 10, David was only 7, but he was already the king of the house. Whenever he did something wrong, Mom just laughed. "He's just a little boy." But if I did the same, Dad would drag me to the back of the house and make me stand facing the wall without asking a single question. One time, David cut all the fur off our neighbor's cat with scissors and blamed it on me. I got slapped 3 times without being allowed to explain. That cat still hates me to this day. I used to think it was just because I was the oldest and they were stricter with me, but I was wrong. I wasn't just the firstborn. I was David's shadow. Everything in the house revolved around him. Every meal was what he liked. Every weekend we went to watch the team he rooted for. I once asked Mom to let me join an art class. She brushed it off like it meant nothing. "That silly stuff won't get you anywhere." At 14, I met a girl named Megan in English class. She liked listening to my stories, and I liked the way she laughed when I imitated our teacher's voice. For once, I didn't feel invisible. But just a few weeks later, David approached her behind my back, invited her out, and posted photos online with the caption, "Just friends," like a slap in the face. When I confronted him, he shrugged. "I liked her first." I told my parents. Their only response was, "Come on, Adam. You're a boy. Don't be so sensitive." Megan felt awkward and started avoiding me. That's when it really sank in. I wasn't the child they felt the need to protect. I was the stepping stone for David to rise. They never said it outright, but the way they treated me said it all. One year, David got a mountain bike for his 12th birthday. I got a cupcake with a candle. Dad laughed when he handed it to me. "You're grown up now. You don't need toys anymore." As I got older, the favoritism became impossible to miss. Whenever relatives visited, I was given fake equality. My parents made me sit close to David, dress like him, smile for photos with our arms around each other. But as soon as the guests left, it all reverted. David got everything he wanted, and I disappeared from priority. My aunt, Mom's younger sister, once asked outright, "Why are you letting Adam be treated this unfairly?" My parents didn't answer. But a month later, we moved from Colorado to Idaho, nearly 200 miles away. Mom said it was because Dad got a new job. But I knew they just wanted to get away from people who might call them out. We moved into an old 2-story house with no close neighbors. From then on, no one outside the family could see what really happened behind closed doors. For me, it marked the beginning of a different kind of prison. Not chains, but the kind of cold that sinks deeper with each passing day. At 16, I was still living under the same roof, and David was still the untouchable golden child. Every time I tried to push back, Mom would give me a look, and I'd fall silent. Because I knew, speaking up in that house was the quickest way to become the target. In April of 2020, Salt Lake City fell quiet. The industrial repair shop where I had worked for 6 years shut down without warning when the whole state went into lockdown. My manager called and only said, "Take care, Adam. Hope to see you again someday." I stared at the phone screen, my mind completely blank. 3 days later, the lease on my 1-bedroom apartment ended. I had tried to ask for an extension, but the landlord told me flat out, "I've got bills too, you don't have a job. Better to move out sooner than later." The place was cheap, just a few $100s a month, but I had burned through nearly all my savings during those weeks without pay. My roommate had left the week before to move in with an ex-girlfriend in Oregon. I had no choice but to roll up my blanket, pack what little I had left into my 2002 Ford F-150, and park at a Walmart lot on the outskirts of town. I had an old camper attached to the truck, something I used for fishing trips back when I still made enough money to dream. Now, it was the only place I could call home. I called my parents hoping I could park the camper in their backyard temporarily, a few weeks at most, just until I found another job. Mom hesitated, then her voice turned cold. "You know we don't have space. David, Haley, and the kids already took over every room." They're thinking about another baby. The backyard's full of storage. I paused. I just need a place to park. I won't go in the house. Just clean water and maybe an outlet if possible. Dad cut in, his tone dry. Fine, $250 a week. That's a fair rate. I thought I misheard. $250 to park in your backyard? You think power and water are free? He snapped. David lives here too. You've got to share the cost. I swallowed hard. How much is David paying? That's none of your business. Something lodged in my throat. I ended the call before I said something I couldn't take back. David, my 31-year-old brother with 4 kids under 8, had lived with our parents rent-free for 4 years. His wife, Haley, didn't work even with a college degree. Mom called babysitting her grandmotherly duty. Meanwhile, I was single, unemployed, sleeping in a truck behind a Walmart, and being charged like a tenant. That first night in the camper, I wrestled with the kind of fear I hadn't felt since I was a kid. The chill of being discarded, of knowing I was never anyone's first choice. I lay still in my sleeping bag, ears tuned to every sound, tires rolling over asphalt, wind slipping through the cracked window. I managed a few minutes of sleep before jerking awake when someone moved nearby. I locked every door, gripping a pocket knife like it was my last line of defense. The next day, I searched for work at nearby garages and machine shops. Most were shut down or had already downsized. I stopped by a fast food place offering to wash dishes, but they said staff were already on rotating shifts. My associate's degree in mechanical technology felt completely useless. I had to learn how to live like a nomad. Each day, I drove a few miles just to avoid being asked to leave. Some nights, I ran an extension cord from public lamp posts to charge the mini fridge. I washed with hose water at car washes. I even got meals from food pantries near churches. I lost weight fast, but never called my parents again. I'd rather suffer in silence than crawl back into shame. Nearly 4 months later, I got a call from an auto parts plant in Ogden, about an hour's drive from Salt Lake. They needed someone experienced, ready to start immediately. I said yes without asking the pay. They let me park the camper behind the employee lot, as long as I didn't cause trouble. I worked nearly every day, covered both morning and night shifts. The pay wasn't great, but I had purpose again. I'll never forget standing in front of my parents' house one afternoon, backpack slung over my shoulder, when Haley opened the door and flatly said, "You're back?" No greeting, no concern. I could see David sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone without lifting his head. They didn't need me. They never had. But I wouldn't forget that, because one day, I'd have something they couldn't take away. I remember my first morning after starting the job in Ogden. Condensation blurred the camper window. A distant truck horn echoed. I brushed my teeth using bottled water. Nothing luxurious, but at least I wasn't lost in a Walmart lot anymore. I woke up at 4:30 every day, used the warehouse bathroom before others arrived, and by 8 p.m., I'd rinse my cookware, crawl onto a thin mattress beside a tiny fridge, and try to rest. On cold nights, I slept in 3 layers, using a plugged-in heater to warm my hands. On hot days, the camper felt like an oven. I had to open every window and blast the fan just to breathe. At first, I packed mechanical parts, no degree needed, no skills either. But I always volunteered for broken shifts, even helped repair busted crate sealers when no one asked. 2 months in, Mr. Dawson, our supervisor, called me into his office. Peering over his glasses, he said, "Do you want to learn how to run a CNC machine? We're looking for someone to cover the night shift." I nodded without hesitation. Learning how to operate the machines changed everything. My hourly pay went up, and I got night shift bonuses. On nights off, I taught myself design software. Mark, an engineer at the plant, would stop by my camper around lunchtime with sandwiches and teach me how to read blueprints. No one else at the factory knew I lived in my truck, except Mark and the 2 night guards. They kept it quiet, like an unspoken pact. No pity, no jokes. A year and a half went by. I was promoted to operations supervisor and got a small office at the end of the shipping hallway. From there, I could see the big parking lot where I still parked my Ford each night. Right next to it was my camper, now with added insulation, a new plastic roof, and a small electric system I'd wired myself. I picked up a cheap used mini AC unit on Craigslist, mounted it in the window, and for once, it felt like I was truly living. Every weekend, I wandered the northern suburbs of Ogden. I was drawn to old houses from the 80s, tucked into faded lawns but full of character, more than those soulless, cookie-cutter developments. One red brick, three-bedroom house caught my eye. It had a private garage and a backyard just big enough to park a camper. The for sale sign out front had been bleached by rain and time, like the owner had given up trying to sell it. I called the agent. The initial price was $190,000, but it had dropped to $175,000 after sitting for 3 months without offers. I toured the place and talked to the owner, a widowed old man preparing to move in with his daughter in Texas. 3 weeks later, my mortgage was approved. I put down nearly all my savings, around $30,000. On the morning I signed the papers, my hand shook slightly as I turned the rusty front door lock. But when the door creaked open and sunlight spilled across the dusty living room, I just stood there, frozen. I finally had a real home. The day I moved the camper into the backyard, I stripped the roof, reshingled it, repainted the exterior, and added outdoor lighting. I turned it into a secondary living room, with a mini fridge, a small couch set, and an old screen to stream movies. Friends jokingly called it the guest house. To me, it was proof I'd survived 2 brutal years. I lived in that house for nearly 3 months before I accidentally posted a backyard photo with the caption, "Still breathing, still moving, still doing something good for myself." A few friends liked it, but within a week they showed up, unannounced, no warning. Just the doorbell hammering away, kids' footsteps stomping around, and Haley's loud voice calling from the gate. "Adam, nice place. Open up so we can have a look." I froze behind the door. I didn't need to peek through the curtain to know what was waiting outside. I hadn't even finished rinsing my coffee mug when the doorbell blared like someone trying to break the peace. When I cracked the door, I wasn't met with smiles or congratulations, but with my mother's smug expression. Behind her stood David in a wrinkled shirt, holding his youngest by the hand. Haley strolled into the yard like she owned it. No heads up, no asking. "We heard you bought a new house," my mother said with a stiff smile. "So we came to visit. You didn't invite us, but we were too curious." David stepped in like a tour guide, scanning the corners and nodding. "Bigger than Mom and Dad's place. How long did it take you to save up for this?" I clenched my fists. "You didn't call first. I'm cleaning." "Oh, come on, what's there to clean? You clearly live here alone." Haley chimed in, eyeing the couch like she was already measuring a nap. 3 bedrooms for 1 person? That's kind of wasteful. I didn't answer. I moved to the window and pulled the curtain. Their truck was parked diagonally across my driveway, like they planned to stay a while. My mom sighed and sat down like she'd walked miles. "Adam, you're almost 40. What's the point of a man living alone in a place like this?" David folded his arms. "She means if we stayed here for a bit, it wouldn't hurt. I've got a kid. Haley's pregnant again. You've got the camper. Plenty of space, right?" I nearly laughed, not because it was funny, but because the audacity made my head spin. "You're serious?" "Of course. You've lived in it before. You're used to it. We just need something stable for a few years until the kids are older." Haley jumped in. "We'll keep the house tidy, but you'll have to follow some rules, like staying quiet during the day when Dan's working nights." I wasn't hallucinating. They didn't just want to move in. They planned to set the rules. I leaned against the counter, keeping my face calm. "Has anyone here even considered paying rent?" Silence. Haley blinked like I'd just insulted the Pope. David shrugged. "We're family. Why are you being so stingy?" My mom slapped her thigh like I'd embarrassed her. "Exactly, Adam. Family means leaning on each other, not making demands. Your dad and I already said yes. All that's left is your approval." The kitchen shrank. That old pressure, guilt masquerading as love, squeezed the air. But I wasn't that cornered 14-year-old anymore. I stared at them. "This is my house. I paid for it with my own work. No one has the right to force me to give it up, especially not for free." Haley's face turned red. "You're selfish. We've got 3 kids and 1 on the way. You can't hog this whole house." "There are other houses. Cheaper ones. Dan works a decent job. David growled. Mom said you'd say yes. She promised. My mom's eyes flickered with panic, then steadied. Don't do it for them. Do it for me. I just want peace. No, I said firmly. I won't make peace with people who disrespected me for years and now want to barge in like it's owed to them. You shouldn't have spoken for me. David slammed his palm on the table. So you'd rather see your own family suffer? I met his eyes. Choosing not to be exploited isn't cruelty, it's called self-respect. The silence that followed was heavy. Haley grabbed David's arm, pulling him toward the door. My mom followed last, mumbling something under her breath. As the lock clicked behind them, it felt like a clean break from every illusion they carried. But when David turned back, there was something in his stare, not remorse, but unfinished plan. 3 days later, after working a late shift, I pulled into my driveway. The headlights landed on a chilling scene. A big truck parked at the porch, back door wide open. Boxes marked living room, bedroom, kid stuff stacked along the steps. Lights blazing inside the house. I slammed the brakes, no need to guess who was behind it. David emerged holding my AC remote, smirking. Oh, hey, you're just in time. I saved the camper for you. It's still out back. I didn't step out. My mind went blank. Then, crystal clear. I dialed 911, speaker on. Let the dispatcher hear everything. Haley rushed out of the house, hands on her hips, her voice shrill like a siren. What the hell are you doing? You can't do this. Mom already gave permission. She said it was okay. I kept my hand on the phone. You trespassed, changed the locks, and moved property without my consent. Do you have any legal documents? David stepped forward, waving a stack of printed papers. Yes, a rental agreement between us, signed 2 weeks ago. I looked down. The scrawled signature looked like it was written by a third grader. Not a single line matched my real one. They even got my last name wrong. I let out a dry laugh that chilled even me. David, do you think I'm blind? He tilted his chin defiantly. We needed a place to live. I had to do something. You're being selfish. I'm being selfish in my own house, I replied, eyes fixed on Haley as she began ushering her kids inside, like prepping for a storm. Less than 10 minutes later, a police car pulled up at the curb, red and blue lights flashing across the lawn. 2 officers stepped out, calm but direct. I pointed to the newly replaced lock on the front door, then to the drill still lying on the steps. They changed the lock without permission, forged a contract, and tried to occupy the house. David opened his mouth, but the taller officer raised a hand. Does anyone here have documentation proving ownership or legal residency? I silently handed over my new ID, showing the address clearly. Haley popped her head out and screamed, "Can't you see I'm pregnant? You really want to throw a family out on the street?" The second officer turned without blinking. Ma'am, being pregnant is not a license to break the law. Not long after, my parents showed up too. My mother immediately slipped into her usual theatrical tone. Adam, you can't be this stubborn. You know Dan needs this house more than you. You're all alone. I raised my hand. You're replaying an old script, but this time, no one's laughing. The lead officer held up the forged contract. The signature doesn't match. The document's not notarized. If the homeowner presses charges, this is signature fraud. I stared directly at David. I could take you to court. The security footage captured everything. Changing locks, threats. I haven't called a lawyer yet. Only because of your kids. David lowered his head. Haley covered her face and sobbed like her world had collapsed. My mother stood frozen, trying to stay composed. But no one believed them anymore. Not even the cops. One of the officers ordered my family to vacate the property that night. You've got 15 minutes to gather personal items. Anything that isn't yours stays put. Haley kicked a cardboard box and slapped the wall. We deserve to live here. He's just a lonely loser. I looked at her, feeling nothing but hollow. I lived in my truck for 2 years. You called me useless to my face in front of my parents. But I never took over someone else's house. You just did, while your kids watched every second. Haley turned away. David quietly dragged boxes into the yard, his back slightly hunched as if the weight wasn't just physical. Once they were gone, I stepped inside, locked the door, and leaned against the wall. Outside, a moving truck rolled slowly down the quiet street. But in my mind, something else clicked on. I needed to prepare more. Because next time, it wouldn't just be a break-in. It would be whoa. That night, as calm returned, I sat at my small desk beside the kitchen window. My hands trembled, not from cold, but from simmering rage. Outside, the street lamp cast tangled shadows across the lawn like a spiderweb. I opened my laptop, plugged in the hard drive from the security cameras, and skipped to the footage. David and Haley changing the lock, carrying boxes. Haley screaming when the police told them to leave. I didn't write much, just a few brief paragraphs stating facts. I included time-stamped video clips, faces clearly visible. No insults, no judgment, just what had happened. From their unreasonable demands to the attempted invasion, to the fake documents they brought in with straight faces. I made the post public, then I dropped the link into the family group chat, the one where relatives usually shared birthday pictures, wedding clips, and harmless jokes. I shut the screen and let the clock run like a flipped hourglass. The next morning, my phone had over 30 messages, one from Aunt Ellie, who still sent me Christmas cards even when I never replied, one from Uncle Roy, who once told me to forgive everything because blood is blood, even a cousin from Wisconsin I hadn't spoken to in 8 years. You did the right thing. I can't believe you didn't go crazy from all that. David didn't stand a chance. My side of the family stood frozen like stone when the truth surfaced. No one expected me to be proactive. No one thought I'd have airtight evidence. Haley deleted every vague post she'd ever made about a selfish older brother, replacing them with bland family photos that looked painfully fake. My mom stopped posting grandkid pictures, switching to shots of rose bushes in her backyard. David went completely silent, his profile wiped clean like he never existed. I knew they wanted to twist the story, make me look cold, heartless, unwilling to bend. But this time, words couldn't outrun video. Relatives who only knew Mom's version finally saw Haley barging into my home like she was furniture shopping, David holding up a bootleg contract and lying without a blink. I didn't need to defend myself. They saw it all. Aunt Ellie called, voice raspy. "Adam, why didn't you say anything sooner? We all thought you were distant because you were stubborn." I replied softly, "I wasn't stubborn. I was tired of being forced to stay quiet just so others could save face." Uncle Roy messaged, "If your parents dare say anything at the next family gathering, I'll be the first to speak up." I nearly laughed aloud reading that. Even those who once sided with Adam's mother, the ones who fluttered around the powerful, started to shift. Not out of kidness, but because the truth had clearly landed on Adam's side. To argue now would make them complicit in front of the entire family. A backup account, likely Haley or Adam's mother, tried to argue in the comments. It rambled on, full of excuses, blaming stress, the situation, and a pregnancy-induced impulse. But replies came fast. One family member wrote, "Haley, I used to respect you. Now I'm ashamed I defended you in front of Adam." The post stayed public for just 2 days before Adam switched his account to private. He didn't want to turn it into a soap opera, but he needed the truth acknowledged. Since then, more people began messaging him. Names he once thought would always side with his mother suddenly stood behind him. A cousin asked to see the legendary camper he had lived in for 2 years. An uncle who'd never spoken more than 3 words to him at family birthdays sent a message. "You made me take a hard look at myself." Adam didn't want pity, just silence when needed, and voices when it mattered. And if people couldn't offer that, then at least stop making him the villain for refusing to kneel before injustice. David stood in the yard, face flushed like he'd been splashed with boiling water, clutching the keyring tightly. He stared at Adam without saying a word, then suddenly hurled the keys into the bushes by the fence. One of the officers watching stepped forward. "Pick him up, right now." David didn't argue. He scrambled through the grass, parting weeds, reaching for the keys lodged between stems. When he returned, dirt smeared his face, and his hands trembled. His face twisted under the weight of swallowed rage. Adam held out his hand. David hesitated, then dropped the keys into Adam's palm. His eyes were hollow. None of the arrogance from the day he barged into Adam's home remained. "Good," the officer nodded, then turned to Adam, voice firm but respectful. "We'll stay until they've fully vacated." Adam's mother stood by the curb, arms crossed, eyes avoiding his. She didn't speak as David was told to reload their belongings back into the moving truck. Boxes marked living room, kids' toys, and bedding stacked up, living proof that this home invasion had been premeditated. Adam looked at her and said clearly in front of everyone, "When I asked to park my camper in the backyard, you charged me $250 a week. But David, Haley, and their 3 kids lived here for free for 4 years. How do you explain that?" No one answered. Even his father, who used to snarl whenever Adam pushed back, stared silently at the pavement, as if searching for a crack. Adam continued, voice sharpening. "When I was unemployed, living in my car, you turned me away. But now, this house I just bought, not even here for 3 months. And you all come in, change the locks, forge documents, break in like thieves. Who gave you that right? What trust made you believe that was okay?" His mother's eyes welled with tears, but Adam didn't stop. Tears were her old defense, used to paint herself as the victim. "I've lived long enough to know I was never loved like David. I was just the backdrop. But that's over now. Don't expect another chance." David hung his head, gripping his crying children's hands. Haley turned her back, clutching her belly like she hoped fake labor pains would save her. When the last box was loaded, she spun around and shouted, "You'll be alone forever, Adam. Someone like you will never have a family. No one wants you." Adam smirked. "You got one thing right. I don't have that kind of family. But at least I have peace. Something you can't fake, can't steal, and sure as hell can't buy." The 2 officers nearby tried not to react, but Adam saw it, the flicker of sympathy. Not for Haley. Not for David. But for the man who had finally screamed back at the family that crushed him. As the moving truck reversed out of the driveway, his mother turned back again, but an officer stopped her. "Ma'am, Mr. Adam requested no further contact. Please respect that." She stopped, sighed, and walked away, her purse swaying with each heavy step. Adam didn't look back. He closed the door, locked it twice, and leaned against the wall, breathing in silence. The only sound was the soft hum of the air conditioner. The next morning, Adam saw Haley post on social media, "Some people share blood but feel like strangers. When you need them most, all they do is lock you out." No likes, no comments. A day later, it vanished, replaced by a photo of a simple meal and a caption, "Starting over." The whole family saw it. No one reached out to them. No one defended them. No one asked, "Did Adam go too far?" Instead, Adam got a message from Aunt Ellie. "You kept your house and your dignity. Don't let anyone make you feel wrong for doing what's right." I smiled and said nothing. I didn't need anyone's validation. But today, even with the sky overcast, my heart felt brighter than any morning before, because at least now, the silence from the whole family, especially those who once acted like they were the center of it all, was the loudest declaration of all. Injustice no longer had a place here. Snow began to fall in mid-December, earlier than usual. I stood by the kitchen window. Its glass fogged with steam, but I could still see the yellow lights I had strung around the fence. A handwritten sign hung on the front door. "Welcome to the survivor's home." It was a joke I wrote for myself, but everyone who read it smiled and nodded. This year, the family suggested holding Christmas Eve at my house. No one mentioned Dan. No one asked whether my mother was coming. When I sent the guest list, I made sure not to leave a blank space for those 2 names. Not out of revenge, but because I had stopped forcing myself to maintain ties just because of blood. A distant niece, Mia, brought a tray of classic jazz records and a box of homemade cookies. Aunt Ellie came early to help me hang pine cones and place scented candles in the corners. Inside the living room stood a 7-foot tree, decorated with silver glass ornaments and tinsel I had bought at the Ogden night market. At the top was a star I folded from the mortgage contract, a reminder that this home was earned, not gifted. Around 20 people gathered that night. Laughter echoed from the main house to the camper out back, which I had converted into a cozy lounge with a mini heater and a small brown leather couch. The kids crowded in, calling it the magic bus. When we opened the wine, Uncle Rick, who once said I was selfish for not helping my brother, raised his glass and spoke in a low voice. Adam, this year you taught the whole family something. Silence isn't always submission, it can be preparation. I'm proud of you. The room burst into applause. I blushed but smiled. Part pride, part relief that they finally saw me differently. Not as David's shadow or the loner, but as the man who owned his own home, and finally, his voice. No one brought up Haley or the vague social media posts she used to write. They didn't have to. Their silence was a choice. After that night, no one texted to ask, should you make peace with your family? They had seen clearly. What I did didn't come from bitterness. It came from boundaries. I finished cleaning up around midnight. Some relatives stayed over. The rest drove home as Ray Charles played softly in the background. As I stepped outside to check on the camper, I sat down on the porch steps, running my hand across the cold wood. Nearly 2 years ago, this had been my living room, my bedroom, and my hope. Now it was just an extension of what I had rebuilt with my own hands, a real life. I opened my phone, glanced at my contacts, then closed it. Not because there was no one to message, but because I didn't need to fill a void anymore. That didn't mean I would be alone forever. Next week, I planned to set up a dating profile. Maybe start with a few coffees, a few simple stories about surviving winters in a camper without losing my mind. Nobody needs a hero monologue. They just need the truth. I also wanted to travel. Not for work, not to escape. Maybe Oregon or Colorado, places I'd once lived as a child. I'd bring my camera and capture the moments I used to overlook while struggling to survive. As I stood up, a thin layer of snow dusted my shoes. The wind whispered through the pines. I looked back at the house, the warm light still glowing through the windows. There was warmth there, echoes of laughter, and most importantly, it belonged to me. No one could take that away anymore. Not by blood, not by forged documents, not by tears or threats. From someone once dismissed by his entire family, Adam rose from isolation and hardship to rebuild his life through resilience and determination. He not only protected what he had earned from being exploited, but reclaimed his voice, his dignity, and his rightful place among the people who finally saw his worth. His story is a powerful reminder. No one defines your value but you. And sometimes, peace begins with locking the right door. What do you think about Adam's decision and how he defended his life? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more emotional, surprising, and powerful family stories like this one.